itself having to strike a delicate balance in this post-Mubarak era. It needs to spend to stimulate its economy, of course. Not so little that it ends up damaging the recovery, but enough as well to keep the people happy and the social unrest at bay. Jane Araf explores all of those issues now from Cairo.
The protests that toppled President Hosni Mubarak were just the beginning of the change Egyptians are demanding. Finally freed to protest and even go on strike, public workers like these policemen are demanding a 200% pay rise.
I'm telling you, I have my rights, and I'm asking those responsible at the Interior Ministry for them. You took our demands, and we gave you enough time to fulfill them, but nothing happened. Nothing.
After decades of poverty and repression, expectations are incredibly high, but the transitional government has run out of money. With a huge disparity between the rich and poor, governments have traditionally responded with subsidies on fuel and food for everyone. Egypt's finance minister says that has to stop.
I say the cancer of the budget is subsidies, and unless we start treating this, it will kill us. This year the subsidy allocated for gasoline and fuel products was £95 billion. That's very dangerous. In 1990 or 1991 it was £1 billion. In the last 20 years the subsidy has increased 20 times. And it's still increasing.
The International Monetary Fund says it would like to see targeted subsidies that go only to the poor. Egypt is the Arab world's most populous country. Almost 78 million people live here, many of them surviving on a little over $1 a day. To meet even some of the demands for higher wages, the government will have to borrow money at a time when borrowing costs are rising.
I think that's the dilemma people in government now have. That is, they want to be responsive because people have salaries. The doctors in Egypt, the doctor gets something like £400 a month. That's less than $100 a month. So when people make demands to increase their salaries, I can sympathize with them. I understand them. And politicians have an additional problem. Not only do they understand, they want to be responsive. Right? Well, the trouble is, I want to give them the money, but where the hell do I get it from?
With the uncertainty created by both the revolution and the global financial crisis, investments in Egypt have dried up and tourism has dropped. Unemployment has climbed dangerously high and is expected to worsen. Inequality was one of the main reasons for the revolution. Political oppression combined with grinding poverty. A lot of the oppression is gone, but the economic hardship is about to get even worse. In Egypt and around the region, a combustible combination. Jane Araf for Counting the Cost, Cairo.
Now, as ever, timing is everything, and this week we've seen a timely report from the International Monetary Fund, its regional economic outlook for the Middle East and Central Asia. And we've got Masood Ahmed from the IMF in Dubai with us to talk us through that. Masood, thank you for your time. As I look over this report, I'm going to make a huge sweeping generalisation in that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. At least that's the way it seems. It seems like the oil producers are still having a good economic time and the others aren't.
I think it's certainly the case that the outlook is more differentiated this year, and the oil exporting countries are doing better because the price of oil is higher, because they've used some of that extra money from oil sales to finance economic activity in the rest of their economies. The oil importing countries, the emerging markets, particularly those that are going through a transformation, social and political transformation, are dealing with a number of pressures coming from the rest of the world slowing down, cost of borrowing is up, but also domestic pressures because tourism and investment flows are down, in part driven by uncertainty as to what's going to be the outlook in these countries. And as a result, we do see this year the oil importing countries in the region growing at less than 2%, and that's really far too low to generate the jobs that they need and to manage the expectations of their young people.
Okay, then let's look at some of the special cases that we've seen this year. Now, I'm talking particularly Tunisia and Egypt, and I guess we could probably include Libya, though that's slightly different. At any rate, countries that have gone through extraordinary change and have to not quite rebuild their economies, but rethink how they trade with the rest of the world, because it could all open up for them right now, couldn't it, if they do it right, if they capitalise?
Yes, so if you take, for example, Tunisia and Egypt, they're both countries that have had a relatively high rate of growth in the past, actually higher than many other countries in the Middle East. But the problem was that that growth wasn't being shared broadly enough. And there was a sense that the access to the opportunities that came with that growth weren't being equally distributed. They were being captured by a privileged few. So the model going forward for both Tunisia and for Egypt is going to be to preserve those elements which made them effective in terms of growth, but now to have a more open and job-creating model, and to have institutions that are more transparent. And that's the path on which I think they're embarked.
Right, and you said job-creating model then. That was actually going to be my next point. Because arguably, or certainly, in the case of Tunisia and Egypt, it was a young population which didn't have jobs, and that was a big part of why they rose up against their governments. Therefore, how crucial, or actually, how do these countries go about this level of job creation to satisfy their own people?
I think the key to creating jobs in Tunisia and in Egypt going forward is partly to quickly restore confidence so that investment starts to happen, particularly investment among small and medium enterprises. You know, it's quite interesting that in the Middle East, small and medium enterprises tend to operate more in the informal part of the economy than they do in the rest of the world. And one of the reasons why that is because the burden of regulation for small enterprises to be in the formal sector of the economy is higher. And one thing that could be done relatively quickly is to begin to see what elements of the regulatory burden on small enterprises could be lifted. Another thing that could be done, which would have a relatively quick impact, would be to try and finance some infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects can create jobs. Experience has shown that from around the world, and jobs relatively quickly. It is important, though, that these projects are done in a way that doesn't create permanent liabilities for the public sector, because what you don't want is to hire a lot of people into the public sector and then find 3 or 4 years from now that it's very hard to unwind them. And the final thing I would say is that, you know, to create jobs, you've also got to look at the skill set of young people. A lot of young people in the region have a lot of education, but that education is more targeted for the jobs in the public sector that they had yesterday, rather than giving them the skill set that they need to be able to get jobs in a more dynamic private sector today. So there are these different elements that they could begin to look at.
That is Masood Ahmed there from the IMF's Middle East Department in Dubai. Thank you for your time, Masood. So what we've been given there are the economic conditions, if you like, and we've got another guest with us now, again from Dubai, to talk about how those conditions actually impact business. It is the Middle East CEO of international tech company Siemens, Eric Kaiser. Thank you for your time, Eric. In speaking to the IMF there, we talked a lot of jobs creation as being one of the keys for growth. How do you personally see the jobs market in the Middle East?
Job creation goes along with the growth of business in the region, and the potential to grow the business in the region and to diversify the economies is enormous. So we, as a very strong employer, having 8,000 people on our payroll here throughout the Middle East, coming from 60 different nationalities, will continue our growth path here in the region.
And with the downturn that we've seen in established markets, if I can call that, obviously Europe, also North America, do you see the Middle East as a major, if not the major growth area for the company?
The Middle East has ever been a growth area for us and for our business. So our roots go back to the year of 1856, where our company founder has visited Egypt to supervise the laying of a telegraphic cable through the Red Sea. So we have extremely strong ties and long roots here in the region, and ever since we have been growing our business.
Right. You know, last week on Counting the Cost, we spoke to the CEO of SAP, of course the world's biggest business software company. And he said he was out here in the Middle East looking at jobs creation, and he said he had a lot of his focus on young people, trying to recruit young people, university graduates, get them into a program which would get them eventually into strong, hopefully well-paying jobs. Do you share that sort of idea or invest in any program which targets young people?
Yes, we are in a constant situation to look for young talents. In order to win them on board, we have rolled out different initiatives, and one of them is the Siemens Student Awards, where we are focusing specifically on the Middle East students, that they can file their application. We want to understand from them how they see the situation, how they see the solution of the pressing questions of today. So the Student Award is one very important initiative where we have gathered about 640 different ideas from around 8,000 students.
Okay, so you're not just getting young people into a recruitment program and into eventual employment, you're actually finding out what they have to say and harnessing their brain power, their ideas, I guess.
That is correct. And we start even at the very young school ages, where we provide kits for children, like a discovery box, where they can learn a lot about renewable energy, or green boxes system, where they can learn a lot about environmental technologies. And we roll out these programs together in different countries with local partners. So it's not, we are only not addressing only the students, but also the children already at a very early stage.
Right, very interesting talking to you. Thank you, Eric Kaiser there from Siemens Middle East. Now, in this part of the program, we're looking at the aviation sector, in particular the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Late in its delivery, but it has now finally flown commercially with the Japanese airline ANA, All Nippon Airways. Aside from all the talk about fuel efficiency and reduced cabin pressure and the like, the Dreamliner is something of a Japanese success story, the kind of story Japan needs after the year it's had. Divya Gopalan looks at that now from Tokyo.
Boeing's state-of-the-art plane was dreamt up in the United States, but couldn't become a reality without Japanese expertise. 35% of the aircraft is made in Japan. The defining feature is the material used.
We were the first company to make this type of carbon 40 years ago, and even then we thought it could be used for air travel. When we put the material on the market, Boeing approached us to modify it for planes. It took this long to make sure it was safe in the sky.
It's 10 times stronger than iron and a quarter of the weight. And with the latest jet engines, the 787 can fly 30% longer than other planes of the same size while using 20% less fuel. What also makes the 787 unique is that the companies involved are somewhat insulated from the economic turbulence in Europe and the US, and also from the strength of Japan's currency. The yen has hit highs against the dollar not seen since World War II.
Generally speaking, the export industry has been badly damaged by the strong yen. But with regards to the Dreamliner, both the body parts and wing parts are Japanese technology. So even if the yen gets stronger, they have no choice but to use Japanese skills at the moment.
Japan is still recovering from the March 11 disasters. The country has just logged its biggest trade deficit on record for the first part of 2011, meaning imports far exceed exports. So, having stalwarts like Mitsubishi Heavy and Panasonic involved in kitting out the plane is reassuring. Over the next 20 years, sales of the 787 aircraft are forecast to top $400 billion. And with a current price tag of $200 million a plane, Boeing has spared no expense to make it a ride to remember.
It seems they've thought of everything when it comes to the passenger's comfort. The air pressure is lower, so you don't get that popping feeling in your ear. The humidity is higher, so the air is not so dry, and the plane is quieter. And they've also installed this quirky little feature in economy class where the seats slide forward so you don't bother the passengers behind you.
But Boeing shouldn't be sitting back just yet, according to aviation authorities in the United States. They are concerned about how to repair wear and tear on the carbon composite that makes up the plane as it logs years of flying hours, making the very character that sets the Dreamliner apart the very issue that could keep it on the ground in the future.
So what do the industry players think of the 787? Well, we had the chance to sit down with Tony Fernandez this week, the CEO of AirAsia, among many other ventures. We did talk about those as well, and also the whole concept of doing business in troubled times. But we started with Boeing's Dreamliner itself. Take a look.
Well, I mean, I think definitely anything that's more fuel efficient is good for the industry. Airbus obviously have theirs coming out, the 350. But it's been, you know, something long in the making. So obviously proof is in the pudding, looking at the results. It's good we have a joint venture with ANA, so we'll be able to see how well the plane...
Because these sorts of delays could have put a lot of people off, and have put some people off. There've been cancellations of orders as well. Because people
I mean, I think Boeing got quite an issue ahead of them, because we have 900 aircraft to deliver. It's tough enough doing the first one, but then you've got to keep the supply chain going. So it's going to be interesting. But certainly we took a big risk initially by signing up the NEO, which is the A320, a new version which came out in 2016. I think that's proven a wise move. Now Boeing's come out with a 737 MAX. So I think planes following the 787 is going to go through a whole new regeneration. The 777s, the 747s, the A330s are all going to be changed. So it's a good time for the aviation industry.
Well, this is what I was just thinking. As you mention all of that,
it's a generational change.
I find it hard to believe we're in a recession at the moment, the way you're talking about so bullishly about the airline industry.
Well, you know, we're in a good part of the world in Asia. I'm in a good part of the business, being in a low-cost business. There are hundreds of millions of people who want to fly. We are in a nice geography where it is easier to fly than to drive or to take a train. So we're feeling it less so than, you know, I think we'll have a fantastic third quarter. Our fourth quarter looks very good. So we're feeling it not like Europe or America, but I think Asia is a special place to be right now.
So you saw a spot in the market when things started turning down, airlines suffered, oil prices were high as well, and budget airlines was the place to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't of course, look in a bowl and say that's the way it was going to be, but certainly.
But there was something to be exploited there.
Certainly, we grabbed that, and I mean, we found I've been very philosophical. Recessions are great times to build businesses, actually, and great time to brand businesses. While others, incumbents, were cutting back on advertising, you know, we went out there and tripled our spend. We've taken a very different view that during a recession, it's best time to advertise, build your brand, build a network, because when things bounce back, you're in a very good position.
But if you're going to spend all that money during a downturn, I mean, that's got to affect your bottom line at some point, doesn't it?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you know, we think there's always a market there. In fact, our results were fantastic. We had record results 2 years ago, and we had another record year last year. So recessions don't necessarily mean you make less money. It's how you position yourself.
Expansion?
Well, we've bought 300 aircraft. So we're believing
a little bit of expansion there, sure.
We've got 100 now. We have another 75. In fact, you know, first I'm saying it on television, we are looking at bringing forward our orders. We'll be one of the few airlines doing that. We're taking it on average about 16 aircraft a year. But looking at the way the market's going, we may have to increase that to 22, 24 a year. So expansion is good. We have a new airline starting in the Philippines, which complements our Malaysian, Thai and Indonesian operation, and then the big one, which I'm very, very bullish about. And again, that's in a country that has seen a lot of economic strife, yet we're very bullish, is Japan. We see that as being a huge profit earner for us.
Because?
Just 100 million people who haven't been able to fly as much because fares have been so expensive. We're a classic economic theory, right? When you reduce the price, the demand grows. And in Japan, there's a huge amount of pent-up demand to travel. There's a huge amount of pent-up demand of people in Southeast Asia and China and Korea who want to go to Japan because of all the cultural influences they've had on us.
Let's get away from airlines, look at some of your other business interests. Team Lotus in Malaysia, how's that doing for you?
Well, really good. What we've done is we're building a business around it. Formula One has always got the appeal in terms of the branding platform. It's been a fantastic branding platform for my businesses and our other partners, which include GE and Dell. But we also see a business that we can spin out of it in terms of car business. We think there's a huge opportunity to develop electric cars and gasoline, affordable sports cars in our part of the world and also Europe.
Kind of like what McLaren started doing.
Yeah, but McLaren's the other end of the spectrum. We would make it in the 30,000, 35,000 pound mark, and incorporate a lot of Formula One technology within there. We also think Formula One has an amazing propensity to develop new technology, and we've married Formula One, motorsport and aviation together. So we're working on some very interesting products in forms of composites, in forms of electronics for the aviation industry and the car industry, which has been spun out of the Formula One business.
Let's throw football in the mix as well, QPR. You own a premiership football team.
Yeah, and it was a good weekend. We beat Chelsea.
How about that?
I was just off the phone with the Chelsea manager just now, just before coming here. Again, that business has to be business. This is not a vanity asset. There's tremendous potential to build QPR into something quite special. I obviously have the link into Asia, and hopefully build some following in this part of the world as well.
But then what becomes, I mean, AirAsia is still your core business. These they're not small enough to call them side projects. A Premier League football team and a car racing team, they're not side projects. How do you...
How do I spend my time?
Yeah.
Well, BlackBerry helps. But basically...
When they're working.
Basically, yeah. Basically, I'm the CEO of the airline. That's my job. I can take some of my money and put it into a bank. I can put it into unit trusts. I've put it into assets that can spin off other businesses. So in Formula One, it's in many ways a venture side where we've built lots of businesses, all run separately. QPR, football, is a huge branding platform. But I mean, I can't announce it yet, but we have lots of ideas in terms of monetizing it. Manchester United have done a phenomenal job. We are in a great city in London. The Premier League is huge, and we have many ideas of monetizing that
well, it's
business.
International, isn't it, Premier League?
Correct. But really, in long answer to the short question, these are all financial investments for me, run by independent management teams.
Before coming up to do this interview, I was talking to someone in our newsroom. I said, I'm about to interview Tony Fernandes, and his eyes sort of lit up. He said, you know, he's like another Richard Branson, a mini Richard Branson. What do you think of something like that?
Well, it is something that haunts me. One day, maybe the other way around. They'll say Richard Branson's like Tony Fernandes.
Like Tony Fernandes, yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. Look, he was my boss. He hired me. He brought me into the music business. He has a Formula One team, of which we're beating quite convincingly right now. And he's a great guy, but we are different. The world needs people like him.
I was about to say that because we interviewed someone about this just a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually at the same time of Steve Jobs' death, and saying that the world needs entrepreneurs right now. If we're in a recession, if we're in tough times, you need people who can still think big and still dream big.
That's the last point, dream big. We dream. You know, we set up a Formula One team with nothing. We built a great business around it. We started an airline with 2 planes. 10 years ago, just 2 planes. And now we have 100 planes carrying 30 million people. In the next 10 years, we'll carry 60 million people. So the world needs some dreamers. My philosophy has always been it's better to dream and take a risk than sit there 55 years and say, I wish I tried. So Branson is a dreamer. And
so are you?
I am a dreamer. We dream sometimes different things, sometimes similar things. But underpinning all of it, we love life.
Tony Fernandes, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Tony Fernandes there from Air Asia. And that is where we're going to leave you this week, but if you want to get in touch, here's how you do it. Either send a tweet to me at Kamal AJE or our business editor at Abid Oliver Ali, all one word. If you're not on Twitter, use the old-fashioned email if you like. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. And then while you're online, you can go to aljazeera.com/business and link on to the CTC page where we put all our episodes up in full for you to catch up on whenever you'd like. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.